The Fallschirmjäger, or the German paratroopers, were vital elements of the German lightning war doctrine. Their training was particularly tough. It started with a 4-week-long physical regime consisting of unarmed combat, weapons handling, and 30 kilometers long forced marches, culminating in bigger and bigger unit exercises. Their training was similar of the World War II British commandos. The qualification phase to become a real paratrooper consisted of 6 jumps. The first would be at a height of around 200 meters, the next 2 at 150 meters, but in a stick of 6 trainees. Their 4th jump would be from the same height, but at dusk or dawn, and as part of a larger stick, approximately 10 men. For the 5th jump, they would be a part of a Kette formation, a V formation of 3 Junkers 52 aircraft. And the final jump would be made under simulated combat conditions, up to 9 aircraft flying at little over 125 meters in height. After the 6th jump, they received the parachutist badge. The airborne operations undertaken by the German army during World War II can be classified in 2 groups, according to their purpose. In the first group, the attack took the form of sending an advance force by air to take important terrain features and hold the captured points until the attacking ground forces arrived. This operation was aimed at a rigidly limited objective within the framework of a bigger ground operation. This was the case in the airborne operation in Holland in 1940 and on a smaller case during the Ardennes offensive in December of 1944. The common characteristics of these operations is that they were limited to capturing the objectives and holding them until the ground forces arrived. Beyond that, there was no further action by the troops landed from the air. In the second group are the operations having as their objective to capture an island. On a large scale, these included the capture of Crete in 1941. On a more limited scale, these included the capture of the island of Leros in 1943. The planned and later abandoned attack on Malta in 1942 also belongs in this category. In every air landing, there are 2 separate phases. First, the strip of terrain must be captured from the air, so an airhead must be established. This airhead may or may not include the objective. Second, the objective of the air landing must be captured and held in ground battle. So the second phase is similar in nature to conventional ground combat. 3 tactics were used during World War II to land troops from the air at their place of commitment. Troops could be landed by parachute, by landing on transport planes, or by transport gliders released from tow planes. All 3 methods were used in varied combinations depending upon the situation. For large-scale operations, regular ground troops will have to be used in addition to the parachute units. These ground troops need equipment modified to fit the conditions of air transport. In recognition of these factors, the German armed forces had taken steps even before the war. In 1938, an army unit, the 22nd Infantry Division, had been outfitted for transport by air and given the designation of Luftlande or Airlanding Division. The unit was committed only once, during the first Great Airlanding attack in Holland in 1940. The airborne troops would on the first day attempt to secure the airfields around the Dutch seat of the government, The Hague, and then capture the government together with the Dutch High Command. Also, on the first day, German paratroopers would simultaneously secure bridges at Rotterdam and Dordrecht to allow mechanized forces to relieve the airborne troops from the south. A number of similarities to the German invasion of 1940 and Operation Market Garden in 1944 can be named. In 1940, 12,000 German paratroopers and airborne infantry soldiers participated in the operation. Their targets were bridges and airfields. 4 years later, in 1944, 30,000 Allied paratroopers and airborne infantry soldiers participated in the operation, and their targets were only bridges. During the attack of Crete in 1941, it was impossible for the airborne troops to achieve a victory alone. It was only when army units transported by air had arrived the progress was made toward capturing the island. Since it had not been possible to transport the 22nd Airlanding Division to Greece in time, the 5th Gebirgsjäger, so Mountain Infantry Division, already in Greece, had to be employed, a measure which at the end proved to be very successful. The 5th Gebirgsjäger Division had a force of 50,000 men in 3 infantry regiments and an artillery regiment. It was inserted by air and sea as a follow-up force. The mountain infantry troops were ideal for the task as they had light weapons, were easily moved by air, and could handle the mountainous terrains of Crete. Preparations lasted approximately 1 month, were sufficient to prepare the division for the new assignment. The special equipment of the mountain troops was suited both for transport by air and for the commitment of the mountainous terrain of the island. One fundamental lesson derived from these air landings was that even the very first elements reaching the ground must be fully equipped for the battle. The parachutists landing on Crete had nothing but their pistols and some hand grenades, the remaining weapons and ammunitions being dropped separately in special containers. After the Crete operation, this was changed. It was realized that parachute troops must reach the ground as combat units ready for immediate action. The commitment of gliders has the great advantage that they land their whole load in one place. Since debarkation is a matter of seconds, the troops can bring their full fire and striking power to bear immediately after landing. The noiseless approach of the gliders, which have been released far from the objective, increases the element of surprise. Furthermore, diving gliders are able to make very accurate spot landings within a limited area. Glider troops are also able to open fire with aircraft armament upon an enemy ready to repulse them. The German parachute troops were convinced that this would have an excellent effect on morale. On the other hand, parachute jumps make it possible to drop very large numbers of troops at the same time within a certain area. On this basis, it will be seen that the gliders are particularly suited for capture of specifically designated and locally defended objectives, such as the Fort Eben Emael, while parachutists are more effective for the purpose of capturing larger areas. Among the German airborne troops, a marked preference developed for a method in which an initial attack by gliders was quickly followed up by mass parachute jumps. This plan is not, however, universally applicable. In each case, methods will have to be adapted to the situation, terrain, type of the objective, and amount of resistance to be expected from the enemy. It is evident that only the rich countries can afford such forces, and that efforts must be made to withdraw these troops as soon as possible after each airborne commitment. Otherwise, their value as special units will rapidly decrease. But because of the scarcity of manpower, the German High Command found it impossible to keep these units in reserve in the second part of the war. So as the war continued, parachute troops were almost exclusively used in ground combat, and the percentage of trained parachutists steadily decreased.